Thank you.
I'm going to go ahead and let people in, Marie.
Okay, sounds good. Hello, everybody, and thank you so much for joining us to kick off 2023 with our very first Diversability Unplugged of the year. As we wait for and give everybody a little time to trickle in, I would love to really describe the flyer that is on our screen. It is a cream background with navy text. At the top, in an orange and navy header, is white text that says, "Please keep microphones muted throughout the event." Below that are words in navy text that read Diversability Unplugged, Disability, and Gen Z Advocacy, which is above 3 round pictures of our panel, starting from left to right. Helena Donato-Sapp, she, her, author, 8th grader, and 2022 D30 honoree. Zane Landon, he, him, internal communication specialist, and 2022 D30 honoree. And Isabel Mavrides Calderon, she, her, disability rights activist and high school student. Sneha Devi, the executive director of Generation Patient, unfortunately is not able to join us for tonight's discussion, but we wish her all the healing vibes and we look forward to having her for a future discussion. Okay, back to this description. Beneath the pictures to the left is a navy banner with white font that says moderator, Marie Dagenet Lewis, she, her, operations manager at Diversability, along with a picture of her. Right aligned at the bottom of the words are join our online communities, Diversability Leadership Collective, https://diversability.mn.co. Fun fact, if you join now, you can get your first week free. Centered near the bottom are 2 logos, a Navy Diversability one and an Interpreter Now one. Now, without further ado, let's begin. Thank you again for joining us, and my name is Marie Dagenet Lewis. I am a pale-skinned woman with long black and purple hair, wearing glasses, wearing a black shirt, and sitting in the corner of the room. And I have the honor of being Diversability's operations manager. Tonight, we are going to be talking about how you can never be too young to change the world, as we are joined by a powerhouse panel of the young Generation Z advocates who are blazing trails towards a better tomorrow. It makes my heart so full, really, to have this discussion as a millennial who's creeping towards 30, as we are joined by people who have been making things happen that we've never thought could happen before. And so I would love to really just get right to them and give everybody a chance to give a little introduction of themselves, starting with the visual description. And so we'll start in the order of the flyer. So please, Helena, if you don't mind beginning with an introduction of yourself and a visual description.
Hi, my name is Helena Donato-Sapp, and I am a 13-year-old dark-skinned Black girl with beautiful long locks. I am wearing a gray t-shirt, and my background is sitting in my dining room at home. I'm in the 8th grade, and my favorite subject is science. I love playing my violin. I'm also a 2nd degree blue belt in karate, and I am currently really excited about seeing Harry Styles' concert coming this Friday.
I bet that concert is going to be so awesome. And when I saw your profile during the 2022 D30 honoree disability impact list, I was blown away by all the things that you were doing at literally just 12 years old. But we're going to get back into that in a little bit. Next, we're going to go to Isabel.
Hi, I'm Isabel Mavrides Calderon. I'm an 18-year-old girl. I have straight brown hair and I have a white sweater on. I have gold jewelry on. I have brown eyes. I'm currently in a white hotel background, sitting in the corner of my room. So I've been doing work in disability justice and organizing since I was 13 years old, particularly focusing on policy and accessibility. I've done work campaigning with bills with the ACLU and the Center for Disability Rights, and have done work consulting in accessibility for various think tanks and protests such as the Australian National Climate Strike. I am lucky to be one of Teen Vote 21 under 21 revolutionary people changing the world for 2022. Thank you.
I can think of no one more deserving to be on that list, because I found you on TikTok maybe like a year and a half ago, and I was just blown away by like learning things I didn't even know. I think it was the LACCD case about disability rights, and it's just amazing to have you here and get to really share your story. So again, we'll get back into that in a little bit. Last but not least, Zane, I would love if you can introduce yourself and give a visual description, please.
Of course. Well, thank you. Hi, everyone. My name is Zane Landon. I go by he, him pronouns. I'm 25 years old. I have brown short hair, brown eyes, clear glasses, facial hair. I'm wearing a dark blue coat, a light blue professional shirt. And the background, the best I can describe it is the DI, like the logo Diversability, where it has the ombre of light blues. Yeah, and how I would describe myself, I always describe myself as an authentic storyteller. I think all of us are powerful storytellers, and we all have such a rich history that sometimes we don't give ourselves credit for. And I think the disability identity is rich history and a beautiful community. And I've been able to find community through it. I've been doing disability work through high school. I'm going to get into more about my advocacy story because it started there, but I didn't consider myself an advocate too recently, which I think is an interesting journey. And I serve on several boards for like Eye to Eye. I served on the National Center for Learning Disabilities board. I serve on the board for Best Buddies. And lastly, I am not a student. I just graduated in May with my Bachelor's of Science in Communication. And I just moved to DC. I'm working at National Geographic doing internal communications.
That is so awesome. Congratulations on your graduation. And honestly, you started leading into our first question already. So I'm going to start with you. What is your origin story? How did you get interested in advocacy at such a young age? And Zane, you just said that you never really considered yourself an advocate until recently. So I would love to hear you go more into that.
I have two dimensions of disability. I always experienced mental health growing up. I saw a therapist for several years, probably to the point where I was 12 or 13, and I kind of stopped seeing one when I was around 19 years old. So I was already very familiar with the, receiving professional help. I never saw anything wrong with getting professional help for your mental health. And I think we're seeing more growth now, but there was a time where people really did not see that. And there was a stigma. Well, there still is, but like, it's more normalized now. But back then, like, you would not mention at all that you see a therapist at all. And I grew up in that kind of era. I'm glad that more people are more comfortable talking about mental health now. And I think we have a little bit of the pandemic to take credit for that. But I just think that the pandemic really opened people's eyes to injustice everywhere, even the disability community. Maybe not accelerated as much as we would hope, but I'm glad that there is some self-conscious awareness now. And so I experienced that, but I also experienced another dimension of being neurodiverse, of having attention issues. So I always had a hard time in school, which is why I'm a little happy I'm no longer a student right now. I'm probably going to go back to school eventually for my master's. Anyways, but so schooling was always hard, and I feel like the K-12 system doesn't necessarily have an inclusive model. It's like a one-size-fits-all for students, and it's not really tailored or customized for students with specific needs. And it makes me kind of sad, and I hate that like the special ed program is like kind of segregated to the point where instead of making an inclusive classroom, let's put you in something else because you're different from others, you're other. I'm not saying that's their intent, but it can definitely feel that way, and you can feel alienated. And so I did have a counselor. I did receive personalized tutoring. I was on a 504 plan. And for people who don't know, it's basically like an individualized education plan that supported me as I was going through high school. That was elementary school. Yeah, elementary school. I also experienced migraines. That has nothing to really do with it because I don't have chronic migraines, so it's not necessarily a disability. But I did experience that a lot. I think at the time it was like really frequent, like getting 30 or 40 a month. So schooling was really hard, and it was a hard adjustment But again, the 504 plan really helped me a lot. And the reason why I say I don't identify as an advocate till recently is because I didn't know about having an intention issue. I just thought I was on a support system. And I connected with people who didn't realize they were diverse till later, but like people knew they were neurodiverse. They didn't let them know. I think because the stigma is so strong with the disability identity, that for people with non-apparent disabilities, they may not be told that if they were diagnosed as children. I know it's a weird phenomenon, but I think some people have that experience, and I was one of them. And so in high school, I joined something called Best Buddies, a really good disability rights organization, specifically for people with IDD. That was my first taste of disability. And then I loved it so much, but when I got to university, I kind of chose different path. I was doing different things. And then I was serving in student government, and someone with muscular dystrophy, my friend, Paul, he encouraged me to join Access and Disability Alliance. And that was the affinity group, basically ERG at my university. That was where everything changed. And that was where I was probably my third year of university. That completely changed everything because I think, I didn't know much about disability when I joined, but the way I felt, how welcomed everyone was what made me stay. And that's where I learned how to be a powerful ally. And then I learned about my own disability. Then I got involved in so many different organizations. Like I interned for the National Council on Independent Living. I did a lot of different things with disability work and a lot of different facets. And I'm really passionate about storytelling and disability. I think it's a very powerful way that we can actually normalize disability through storytelling and media. And so I was even able to get the AAPD scholarship for disability media, which is really exciting. So all of that, it was an interesting journey, but I've known some people that, have become advocates later. And it's interesting because there are people with disabilities that have to be advocates to survive. So it's an interesting difference there. And so that is my story of how I've come to terms with my disability and how I've become an advocate.
Mm-hmm. I loved so much of what you said, like so much to unpack, the dichotomy of how some are forced to be advocates for survival, some get the privilege of coming into it in their own rights, how segregated the special education system really is unintentionally, because as we all know, unintentional disability discrimination is still disability discrimination, no matter how unintentional it is. And really, it's like the beauty of storytelling and the type of age that we live in now, to where storytelling has become more accessible to us as individuals. I think that's really that's really a big fuel of the power of all of the digital advocacy and everything we see happening today. And I'm sure we'll dive more into a lot of the topics that you were speaking on, but now I want to give it to Helena for your origin story.
I was born at 27 weeks and had a lot of medical issues as a baby. I had heart surgery at 10 days old, several brain bleeds, and was on oxygen and a heart monitor for my first year of life. Fast forward to first grade, and my teachers suggested that I get tested for learning disabilities. I have tested a few times over the course of my K-8 experience, and I have 4 diagnosed learning disabilities: a visual processing disorder, a working memory disorder, dyscalculia, and ADHD. These learning disabilities, which I refer to as my superpowers, are only one of the many intersectional identities I hold. I am also Black and dark-skinned, a girl, adopted, and have 2 queer fathers. One raised in poverty and the other an immigrant from the Philippines. So to answer the question of why did I get interested in advocacy at such a young age, I just reply that the world brought the fight right to my front door. And that includes the world of schooling, which, as many of us know, is not always welcoming to those of us who are neurodivergent. I became an advocate because I had to fight for a fair chance at my own education. I continue my activism because I want other kids like myself not to feel shame about their disability identities. I'm committed to modeling positive identity formation. Thank you.
Thank you. And just listening to you makes like my inner child so proud and so happy, because I was a disabled child too, but I wasn't as empowered as you are. I thought I had to hide it. And so I'm so glad that you're here and you exist and you're an author and you are telling your story, because you have so much more to tell and I can't wait to watch it. Next, I would love to go to you, Isabel, and just hear your origin story.
Thank you. I resonate so much with what both of you guys said. So I became disabled when I was 11 years old. I had a spinal cord injury doing gymnastics. So I grew up able-bodied. And after I had my spinal injury, I found out I had a genetic condition that actually made me more prone to having spinal injuries. So being like having this drastic change coming into my life, because I grew up as a child being very like having a very different life and like suddenly getting thrown into this world of disability. I really blamed every barrier I faced on my disability, on my body, and ultimately on myself, which led to a lot of self-hatred. And the first time that this stopped for me was when I was finally in an environment with accessibility and accommodations. And I realized that as long as I did have these accommodations and accessibility, I could do everything that I wanted to do. I could achieve everything I wanted to achieve in my life. And my body wasn't my barrier. Lack of access and society was, which led me to question why we didn't just always have accessibility and accommodations in society. So this question is really what made me deep dive into this world of disability rights. I started doing tons of research on disability policy, on accessibility, on the laws and the rights I did have, so I can advocate for myself in the classroom and in my society, and on the movement and where we are now. And I am so glad that I got involved at a young age, because I haven't had the most conventional teenage years. I've had a spinal surgery every year of high school. And while I've had to miss time with my friends or in classes while I was having surgery, I learned very quickly that a lot of the disability rights movement is inherently accessible because it's created by disabled folk. So while I wasn't able to be in my classrooms with my friends, I was able to testify to city council or create a campaign to take down a Supreme Court case with the ACLU, and like all from my hospital bed, which is not something that I was able to do with like normal teenage things. So it made me stop feeling this like deep resentment I had for not having the same experiences as my peers, because I still had a purpose and I still had this life that I loved. And what I love most about the disability justice movement is that it's not about a cure or about overcoming your disability. It's about really fighting for justice and our self-worth as a community. And at a time where I thought that I would not be okay, I would not be whole without a cure, that was what I needed the most.
You're like making me tear up a little bit, because I really resonate with not feeling whole for so long because you needed to live for that cure. And then the power that disability pride really gives of knowing I never needed a cure. I needed accessibility. I needed anti-ableism. I needed more of what the disability justice movement is really all about. It's like, that's probably one of the most life-changing moments ever. And I love that you said you did this all from a hospital bed. Like, that is the most amazing thing about the digital era, which leads us into our next question of how do you use the digital world to make an impact in the real world? I would like to actually go back to you, Isabel, because you started us off with that, and then we'll get to Zay next.
So basically for me, when I started doing this like deep dive research into nonprofits and disability rights and like a lot of these like laws and policies that are so intricate and really hard to understand, especially when you're young, I realized how complicated this really is. And I realized that the only reason I was able to eventually grasp some of these concepts is because I did have time, mainly because I am in an incredibly privileged situation and because I was a child, which gives you more time than like a working adult. So I realized that a lot of this information isn't accessibly out there. And having this information had helped me so much to advocate for myself. I mean, knowing the rights you have is just a critical tool, like you were saying, for self-preservation, for survival, to get the rights that you deserve, and to realize that there are rights that are totally inadequate. So with this thought in mind, I started posting Instagram infographics onto my account. I was 13 years old, so some of them weren't great yet, but they really tried to break down these issues, try to break down these laws, try to break down these historical movements, and where we're going. But I started to gain some traction, but like nothing really compared until I created a TikTok. And those videos started to get a lot more views and to go more viral. And like just do really well. And I found them to be a really effective tool to activism. And I found the TikTok was like the ultimate organizing tool. Like right now I'm in DC to speak at a national conference, and while like maybe thousands of people will come hear me speak about disability rights, the amount of people I could reach on like one TikTok video might be like double that. So I found that like also in these events, like something like this or like a conference, like it tends to be a self-selecting group of people who already know about disability rights or somehow care about it already. In TikTok, you kind of reach this random audience of people. And that's just, I find it to be so much more powerful because you have the ability to just change people's minds, change their perspective, and get them to care and take action. So I take that responsibility really seriously. The way I've used it is, for example, anytime I'm hosting a conference, with the ACLU, for example, I'll tell people on my TikTok to go to the conference. I've gotten people to sign petitions, to call their senators, and my ultimate hope is always to change their minds. And in a world where media has so much power and so much influence, especially with corporations, press has power. So when like I was like, you mentioned the LACCD cases like this that threaten to gut the ADA, where it's really corporations or major school systems involved, the way to shut them down is media outrage. And that's why I found that like social media has been so powerful for that. And for using my TikTok for that, I think has been a really special tool. Social media has also given me my ability to share my voice in the mainstream media. So I've had the ability to like NBC News multiple times. I've been able to go on there to talk about these issues. And honestly, they didn't hear me from my protests. They didn't know me from conferences or from any in-person organizing. They knew me from my TikTok, which I mean, I wish wasn't the case. I wish in-person organizing got more traction, but I'm really happy that there is a way to get these messages out there.
Totally. And it's like with social media and TikTok, you're kind of like using the ableist society to your advantage in a way, because you're getting the mainstream viral music on your stuff. You can get put into the FYP when people who would never look at disability rights ever can get an easily digestible video that not only educates them, but it shows actual disabled representation. I think that's the most powerful part, is that it's like real disabled people making this stuff. It's not just graphics, it's not just a corporate sponsorship or anything. It's like all of the multifaceted lives that live the disabled experience. And it goes so far to like people can make careers out of this now, to where it was like we don't know what we're going to do with our lives if we can't work. It's like we can forge our own path. And so I really just love hearing what you've done with it. And Zane, I know you also utilize the digital media a lot, because I'm pretty sure you have a digital zine. And so I would love to hear from you how you use the digital world to make the impact in the real world.
Yeah, I will share. There's another level to me becoming an advocate, and it does connect to digital media. I think I also became a serious mental health advocate after I experienced a lot of turmoil during my time at university, going into my 4th year. There was a lot of different things happening in my life, a lot of things I really wasn't happy with, things out of my control, and I didn't know how to control it. And so what I couldn't do with the pain, I did it to myself. I know, trigger warning for whoever doesn't want to hear this. And so I was suicidal for a while, and I experience those thoughts frequently. I'll experience them again, and I worry that they're going to come back all the time. And so it was after that where I took the semester off and I really kind of reevaluated everything. I was already on the path of disability advocacy, but then it took a turn with mental health. And so I know that mental health and disability are the same. It's sad that we kind of assume that they're like not connected, but they are. So I viewed them as different, but now I view them as, the same, and that they're both valid. And I wish that people would see them as disabilities, to the point where some people even will say mental health is not a disability because they don't want to be viewed as having a disability. And it tells you a lot about how we think about disability if you think that way. And it's very sad. And so when we were moving into the pandemic, I thought that it was a unique time for the mainstream media to talk about disability and mental health, which surprisingly in a sarcastic way, that they didn't talk about mental health and disability. And when you do hear about these topics, I feel like there's always some sort of an agenda or an angle that's not necessarily serving the disability community. It's serving another purpose. So I really want to see more of an authentic approach to storytelling for disability and mental health. How do we do that? And I really wasn't sure. I was taking copy editing, like an actual university class, and we were tasked to create our own publication. And so I decided to create a publication dedicated to authentic storytelling for mental health, because that's what I was experiencing. A lot of people were across the board. I think that mental health was something that people were experiencing. It was kind of like an equalizer. And of course, everyone's at different levels of experiencing mental health, depending on what your intersectional identities are. But it was still something that people could connect with. And I'm happy that, the COVID really opened up people's minds and eyes to the idea that mental health is something that we should be taken seriously, and that asking someone how they're doing goes a long way. And understanding people's life conditions, and that people who are students or employees, that's not their entire identity, that they have a whole life outside of it. So if they need to go pick up their daughter or their caretaker and they need to go take care of someone, we allow that. And we allow that accommodation because the work will get done. I know it's like a weird way to think about it, but the work will get done. And I think that creates like just inclusive, welcoming place of employment. I think that's important, where we spend so much of our lives at work. We should not be having to hide certain identities. Even companies that have very inclusive disability policies and programs still have very low identification. Like, their employees are still not identifying at a good rate. Usually you'll get like 1% to 2%, even at companies that do have, again, really strong disability policies. So again, there's a lot more work that needs to be done to integrate and support people with disabilities. Anyways, to go to your question, I, started the magazine straight up just from social media. Then we built a website, and it was all about just telling these authentic stories. How do we actually get to the raw truth of people? I think it's important to tell, the inspiration, like talking about, I have a disability, but I've been able to take my power back from the ableist society, and this is what I've been able to achieve. But we also need to talk about the trauma that comes with having a disability in an ableist society. Let's actually talk about that so people understand the ramifications of living in this type of society, what we can actually target, what approaches we can actually make to create a more inclusive anti-ableist society. So we had to have those hard conversations, and I think it's a hard thing, but I think that's where how powerful journalism can be, because it really gets to the root of the problems and the truth of people and their identities, rather than we're featuring this person, this is the work they're doing. Let's talk about their story though, and how that story can build mountains and bridges for people who may be reading it from Brazil or Latin America or some other country. What's so great about digital media and like social media, just everything about, the online scope, is that people can experience it from different countries. Maybe where disability is not even talked about, or they're treated horribly, or they don't go to school because of the conditions or how they're treated. And that gives them awareness to what we go through, and also gives us awareness to what they go through as well. And I love that you can have an influencer come from a different country to speak about disability or mental health that you wouldn't otherwise see. I feel like there was a time where, of course, media was consumed by, of course, the privileged. And I love that media has become so democratized, where almost anyone can become an influencer, which is a good thing and a bad thing. I think it's a good thing for people who have good intentions, but then we have, bad influencers that spread misinformation, and we have to be very careful with that responsibility. But at the end of the day, I think it's such a powerful tool. And COVID was a good example of how people were able to stay connected through social media when everyone felt isolated and alone. So again, we have to, there's good and a bad side to it, but that's what I would say. And a lot of the content that we share is from people who have experienced so much. And it's not even mental health and disability, like it's everything. We talk about assault, we'll talk about racism, whatever it is that someone has experienced that's part of their story, I want to hear it and we want to elevate it. And so that is how I've been able to use digital media. And lately I've been able to speak on several podcasts. And I think that's another interesting avenue as well when it comes to digital media. So that answers your question.
So much is so awesome, because it's like with anti-ableism, it's like understanding makes the biggest impact. And earlier when you were talking about a workplace where the work is just going to get done, we prioritize life, we prioritize just making sure people can go pick up their kids, someone can call off sick. It's like, that's an ideal anti-ableist society to me, because we're seeing people as beyond their productivity, and we're seeing them for what they are. And that again is what storytelling allows us to do too. And the globalness of the digital world is probably one of the best things about our world, because I know I've gotten connected with people with my rare disease from all over the world that if it wasn't for social media, I wouldn't know a single person with it. And just in December, we had such a powerful Diversability Unplugged, where we had Winfred from Kenya speak about the disabled experience in Kenya, where it's literally still a life or death situation. And so it's like we can use our platforms on the digital media and digital world to shine the light on things like that. And you're so right. That's kind of a duty that we have. Helena, I would love to go to you next to hear how you utilize the digital world to make the impact in the real world.
Yeah, I have always loved technology, and both my parents do too, but especially my papa. Although I am a youth scholar and youth activist now, I actually was a child scholar and child activist. I had my first piece of art curated into a museum collection when I was 6, and I published my first chapter in a book when I was 8. My parents started my website, helenalourdes.com, to host my body of work so that my grandma in West Virginia could follow me. As my work grew, so did my online presence, and I have a robust web presence now, mostly because I produce a lot of content. As for myself, I got interested in technology during 6th grade, which was my COVID-19 lockdown year of school. Regular testing in school does not measure my intelligence, comprehension, and skills. As a way to show my teachers that I really understood the content they were teaching me, I started making videos to demonstrate that. You can see all of these on the blog section of my website. These content area videos led me to making PSAs, and I've made them on things that have impacted me, like a PSA on anti-bullying and another on disability justice. Just so you know, my hope is to someday be in film and TV, and so tech skills are really important to me, and I want to increase my capacity to use them. As for my use of social media, I just turned 13 in June, and so my parents are carefully monitoring in the appropriate use of technology and social media. They refer to this year as my apprehenship year, and I'm learning how to be appropriate on social media. My Instagram, TikTok, and Tumblr accounts are all co-monitored by my parents as I learned through good online etiquette. My parents encourage me to follow the celebrities I like, but also follow important change makers at the same time. One other way I use the digital world well right now is that I apply for interview and I have gotten blogging jobs from major organizations. For example, I was one of the 6 girls from around the world chosen to be on the blog team for Girls Learn International, which is a project of the Feminist Majority Foundation. I've written a lot so far, and I love getting my voice out into the world.
And you just have so much more to go to. I can't wait. Like, I love how you took technology and you didn't even wait for anyone to give you the option to show what you can do. You just said, I have this at my disposal and I'm going to show you what I do. And I just love how you make your own paths and you do it so empowerfully. Is that even a word, empowerfully? It should be, because that's exactly how I feel like you're living life. And your dads have to be so proud of you. Like, I'm proud of you. I don't even know you that much, and I'm so proud of you. Before we get to our next question, I would like to just remind our audience that we do have a Q&A section coming up towards the end of the conversation. So if you have any questions that you would like to ask our panel, please put it in the chat with a Q at the beginning of the chat, and we'll make sure to ask it towards the end. And now I would love to know how you all have been able to balance your advocacy alongside your education and everything else that comes with the coming of age, because I'm an adult and it's really hard sometimes. So I can't even imagine how you all are able to balance this. So we'll start with you, Isabel.
Yeah, that's such a good question. It's definitely been a balance. I think when it comes to the coming of age thing, I know like for teenagers, we all struggle with insecurities, especially as a teenage girl. And I think that TikTok at times has exacerbated that. I've definitely had my fair share of trolls. I remember one day, like right after my 18th birthday, I made this video about villain coding with disability. And the next day I woke up to literally 10,000 tweets of people criticizing my appearance. And I mean, that's nothing new as my account has grown. And it definitely like affected my self-confidence a lot at the time. But I think that, I mean, it wasn't that long ago, but I think that over time, I learned to realize why I'm doing this in the first place. I've never went out to be like a beauty influencer. I'm not selling makeup. So it made me realize like that means a lot of people saw it. That means that they're getting the message whether they like it or not. And so that's definitely been one facet of the coming of age, like what that's like as an activist. That's why I think it's so great that Helena's dads are looking through their social media, because it's so important. And in terms of balancing things, it's definitely been hard. Currently, I'm a senior in high school, and it's definitely been learning to balance education with my work as an activist has definitely taken a lot of time. And sometimes I miss school, but when I get stressed, I remember that before I would only miss school because I was in the hospital, and now I have the true privilege to be also missing school because I'm speaking conferences or doing protests. Like right now, I'm missing 2 days. Which I'm sure are important, but I think that what I'm doing now is going to be more important in the long run. It's what I care about most. I definitely have made bad decisions here and there where I missed school, or like maybe it was more important to be in class, or when I've been in class where like maybe I should have gone to that event. But I think it's a learning curve. It's also definitely taught me to make life decisions that are going to affect my future in career and my future as an activist. Like I'm going to college next year. I'm going to Columbia University. The choice to stay, I grew up in New York City, and I've been so privileged to have this hotspot of activism. So the choice to stay in the city was so important to me. And also the choice to major in human rights and in policy has been so important to me, because it's what I ultimately want to do for the rest of my life. So I think that education and activism really do codepend on each other. My education in my school has definitely helped me as an activist. Learning how to do research has helped me publish research papers, which has helped my activism. So it's all been a kind of symbiotic relationship between getting my proper education, getting my advocacy, and taking care of my health while I'm at it. So it is a balancing act.
It's a whole lot of plays, but you all are making it look like it's nothing. honestly. And one thing that I always try to remind myself about trolls is that they're boosting your algorithm at least. Keep commenting because they're helping your numbers. But it really is so incredible that not only have you been able to balance a disabled life, you do your activism, and you're going to Columbia. Congratulations, that's amazing.
Thank
And
you.
it's just going to be awesome to see what you're able to do with that degree and just all the things that you learn by all of the life experiences along the way, because that coming of life is really the best. It's really the best teacher. And so I'm excited for you. Zane, I would love to come to you next with how you were able to balance, because I know you just graduated. Congratulations again. But how did you find your balance? And I love that you're speaking so much on mental health, because that's really such an important part of finding balance. So I would love if you could speak a little bit more on that.
Yeah, I think it's something I've had to learn on my own. Especially, I also think that we're so convinced that we have to have everything together, that we have to be involved in so many things. And I'm an advocate for take every opportunity you can, but make sure that you have the bandwidth and those spoons. If you haven't heard of spoons, it's like what actual availability we have as people with disabilities. It's an interesting theory. And recognizing how much availability you really have and setting those boundaries, I think is one of the most important things you can do. It's what I've learned. And I think when you see someone react to a boundary, it shows what's more important. So if you set a boundary and someone is already resistant to you, that's exactly why you set that boundary. And it's important that you did. And I think that I'm not saying that people are I'm not saying people are mean-spirited, but you know, sometimes when people are upset by that boundary, it's because they can't take advantage of you more, or they can't use your labor for their advantage. I'm not saying that it's completely their intent to do that, but I think sometimes we're so kind and a lot of us are overachievers that we want that recognition. And I also think that sometimes that when you hold certain intersectional identities, like I'm queer, I'm Hispanic, I feel like we're lost in society, that we feel like we have something to prove, that we feel like we have to take on tasks, we feel like we have to say yes to everything. We feel like we have to be people pleasers because, you know, I'm speaking from I'm sorry I said wait, you know, I was lost at times. I feel like I didn't have a group, and I still feel that way sometimes. I'm really happy with where I work and I'm really comfortable so far. But, you know, during those times, I feel like I had to prove myself. I had to do double the work. I had to do triple the internships just to get by. And I thought that I had to have everything together. And even as we talk about, you know, age, it's okay if you start advocacy at age 8. It's okay if you start advocacy at age 50. I mean, as long as you are finding that purpose and that path, I think you're on a good journey in that way. I think I know there's a question about ageism, which I'm interested to speak about, but I think that's what's helped me the most is learn how to actually set those boundaries, schedule the time. I mean, like schedule your time. Like if you need a break, literally schedule it, and even maybe set an alarm if you have to, especially when you get hyper focused or you're working on so many things. But I think if you take that care, and I think as people with disabilities, and if we're advocates, we want other people with disabilities to flourish, why can't we give ourselves that same grace? You know, like we deserve that too. So be an advocate for yourself and your well-being. I think that's what's helped me. And again, schedule those breaks. And I know like it feels weird to schedule a break, but if you schedule your meetings, I think it's a good boundary to say, I'm just taking a break right now, I'm taking my lunch right now. Because we know people work through lunches and all that, which is not right. Anyways, so that's what I would say has helped me the most. I've juggled a lot of different responsibilities, and it can be really hard, and you can experience burnout. And it's a really bad feeling because it feels like you can never gain that inspiration back. And it makes you feel more depressed. So it's important to get help and identify when you're feeling that way before it gets to a breakdown, because they can happen and it's not a good feeling. So that's what I would say is what's helped me. So I definitely had to learn, like grow my own skin when it came to it, like grow and learn how to do it, but also making sure that I'm intentional in how I treat myself.
The self-intentionality is something that I really admire in you, because I'm listening. I will schedule breaks. I always forget. I'm always hyper focused on the next thing, the next task. and then I forget some tasks, and then I get really mad at myself, and then I never, I told my husband the other day I didn't deserve a cake pop. So it's like I never reward myself, I never give myself grace. And that's so essential to living disabled in an ableist society where society never gives us grace. We have to be the one to lead that change. So I think that is such great advice that is really cross-generational. Helena, I would love to hear from you next on how you've been able to balance all of your life between advocacy, schoolwork, coming of age, all that fun stuff.
Like I said before, this is the only life I've ever known because of my intersectional identities, and I've been doing this work all of my life. I do think it helps to have two parents who are such strong activists themselves, because we can talk about balance and how to say no to opportunities and things like that. They have always been fierce about wanting me to have a full childhood when it comes to play, rest, relaxation, plenty of time to be alone with my thoughts and imagination. So I do every sport my school offers because I love to do that. I was captain of our volleyball team. I'm on the basketball team right now, and I'll do track and field later this spring. But just this week, I have this presentation, a new segment to film tomorrow night for a local channel, and a 2-hour poetry class on Saturday at the public library for their Youth Poet Laureate program. I'm working on a few articles to be published soon as well. And this is on top of being the last week of my academic semester and having 2 major tests in science and Spanish and a major science project due on the periodic table of elements. And I'm still going to the Harry Styles concert Friday night. But I guess I would say this one thing about the balance of it all. When you feel passionate about something, I just find that you make time for it. The only thing I really give up is watching TV, and I still do enough of that, trust me.
I love how you just always make sure you have time for fun, time for activity, make sure that you prioritize not just exercise, but team building. It is just so amazing how incredibly full that you were able to live your life. And it's so fun too that you've had such great role models to show you how to be just empowered and living your best authentic life. So that's awesome. And our next question is about ageism. As Zane mentioned before, ageism, for anyone who doesn't know, is a form of discrimination based off of the age. And so I would love to know how each of you have experienced that in any way in your journeys. And so we'll start with you, Isabel.
Yeah, that's such a good question. I think within the advocacy space itself, I've received only praise for my age, but I think where I've really faced ageism the most has been within academia. A couple years ago, I started working on with a USC professor. Actually, not a couple years ago, last year, I started working with a USC professor to publish a paper with a study I was conducting on how accessibility has shifted in the pandemic, during the pandemic for disabled students, physically disabled students in particular. And I mean, this paper, I worked so hard with it. I had peer-reviewed sources. I had a professor from a major university alongside with me, and I was still facing people kind of demeaning my work because of my age, because I was a high school student. And I think especially when it's so important to have research that comes from the people it affects. And this paper was about physically disabled students coming from a physically disabled high school student, which was what it was all about. So I do think that that's where I've really faced it the most, especially in academia. I think also because as disabled people, we're just inherently infantilized. And I think that when someone hears that it's coming from a disabled person, they automatically just assume you to be younger. And that's something I've also definitely faced. I think also like whenever I'm speaking in places, they assume they just expect me to just speak about my disability itself instead of like the activism and the actual issue. And I think part of that comes with this infantilization that's given to disabled people. But I've been lucky enough in the advocacy space itself, especially around other disabled people, I haven't faced that as much as academia.
I'm so glad, at least in the community itself, it's been empowering. And I can only imagine too, with all of your intersectionalities as not just disabled, but you are a young person, you are a woman, you are also someone who is not your stereotypical person in academia. So I can only imagine how all of that intersectionality has really impacted that work. But it's so important, like you were saying, that that work has the people that it's about. And we need so much more research done by young women of color who are disabled and who are living these lives. So I'm really glad that you're able to at least deal with all of that to make sure the representation is starting. And Zane, I would love to turn it over to you next with just to go a bit more deeper into the ageism aspect of everything.
Yeah, no, kind of like Isabel, I feel like there are so many opportunities and programs for younger people, which I think is a great thing to see. But then I feel like when you get complimented on your age and the work you're doing, I think it speaks to a higher volume of why aren't there more youth advocates? Why aren't there more youth advocates fighting for disability rights? Is it because they find it uncomfortable? Is it because they still experience that shame? So I think that that is an opportunity to still work and to see how we can shift that culture so more youth feel prideful with their disability and have no problem saying it on social media or announcing it to people and being accepted for who they are. And I think also, again, I speak on I feel like we have to have everything put together. And I don't know why that is. I think it puts an unnecessary pressure on young people. And I think it speaks again to a larger conversation of ageism for people who are older, which is you need to have everything put together when you're younger because you run out of options when you're older. I think that's the assumption, but I think that's the mindset that people who are older have when, again, I see people who start their careers at 60 or they change their careers at 70 or they get their PhD at 50. It's okay. And I think that it's an unnecessary pressure that young people should not have to experience just because we think that options run out. I think we think in our minds options do run out, but there's so many opportunity. And I will say, as a younger person that have experienced ageism, and I think that we consider that reverse ageism. No, it's just ageism. I think that younger people do experience ageism because sometimes we're in the room and we're the youngest and we're not taking it seriously because we don't have the quote unquote experience that they're looking for. And again, it's the traditional experience. I might not have the traditional corporate experience that you want, but I have experience with blogging, starting a digital magazine, meeting the president of the United States. I have the experience of doing those things. So I do bring an expertise that you may not necessarily have. And that's a good thing. That's a diverse team that we need, right? And so, and I will not share, I think that the disability movement somewhat and disability organizations do, share their bias against younger people. When I see organizations and I see that their entire board of directors are people who are almost over age 40, I think that's a problem. I think it's a huge problem, especially when you may see a good mix of men and women, but you don't see a good mix of race. You don't see a good mix of different disabilities. A lot of them maybe are caretakers. And again, people go into this space for different reasons. But I want to see a board of directors for an organization where it's full of young, middle-aged people, older people, children, whatever it is. I've been in so many organizations where I try to join board of directors or I try to do research projects, and a lot of it is upheld by people who are older. And again, not taking it seriously as a youth advocate because I don't have the years of experience. So I think that's some of the ageism I have experienced.
I feel that so much. Like, it's so frustrating because I'm close to 30, so I'm not even as young as you guys. And I get so frustrated by being undermined by older people who think because I'm younger, I don't have good expertise. And so they make me run my expertise by other people who are like, oh, perfect, good to go. And I was like, okay, I could have skipped a couple steps if they just trusted me as a young professional instead of undermining me just because I haven't lived as much life. It's like we still have experiences that give us a unique set of expertise that no one else is really going to have. And so it's powerful to be able to look past all of the stereotypes and to be able to really hone in on the expertise of many lived experiences.
Yeah,
I see,
can I add one more thing?
of course, I was about to ask.
Just something I thought, no, it's because it's about, ageism, and I find it really interesting because I feel like we are obsessed with media and children. It's like you see some of the most powerful stories, like, people who like Stranger Things, even Wednesday, Avatar: Last Airbender, Harry Potter, like they're all children. And so we can paint pictures and see stories of children having to go through a lot and have a lot of responsibility, but we can't translate that into real life, which I think is really unfortunate. Just something I thought about.
That's a very, very powerful observation. And really, doesn't ageism kind of tie back to ableism, because it's that false sense of superiority that's fueled by a set of preconceived notions that deem something else inferior based off of those notions. So it's like, it's a weird dichotomy. It's hypocritical. And I hope through all of the controlled narratives that people like you are actually putting out there with your media, your videos, social media, research papers, that's going to change that dichotomy, I hope, because it's like, it's there, it's right in your face, it's powerful, and you can't keep undermining something when it's literally changing the world right in front of you. And so next, I would love to go to you, Helena, and hear how you have faced ageism through all of the work that you've done.
I love that you asked this question. And yes, I have felt age discrimination. I have noted to you earlier that I do scholarship. I have published chapters in books, published scholarship in peer-reviewed journals, written blogs for major feminist organizations, published original research on decolonizing schooling, and have been named the designated poet of a national think tank for historically underserved students. I have also curated art in 2 museums. I have presented at major conferences with co-authors as well, and I got standing ovations for my part. Here is the thing though, I get some harsh and thoughtless no's from other scholars. When I submitted a chapter proposal to a scholar at a university in Minnesota, they wrote me back and said that their book was only for serious scholarship. Very offensive and dismissive. Last year, I spoke at the most prestigious conference in the field of education because the editors I worked with on a book put a proposal and we got accepted. That's the one where I got a standing ovation. But this year, I put in a proposal to speak about my 90-page original research article on decolonizing schooling that was just published in a peer-reviewed journal, Iowa Journal for the Social Studies. And that same research conference just ignored my proposal and didn't even have the courtesy to say no to me. The conference agenda came out this week and I am not in it, so I guess that is my answer. But it does beg the question of why. When my adult editors put in a proposal, it was considered and accepted. But when I did it as an independent 13-year-old, it wasn't even acknowledged. Age discrimination really shows up as adults being gatekeepers and not valuing youth voices. These gatekeepers really lose out, to be blunt. Lots of adults are more welcoming, and I am noticing that the more recognition I get and the larger my body of work is, then the more adults are interested in me. I wonder though, how many voices have they missed because of their gatekeeping?
And that is honestly a daunting and very tragic question to think about because of the false sense of superiority. There are so many life-changing things that have been overlooked, minimized, tossed away, and just never even given a chance to change the world. And that is one of the worst parts of ableism. One of the worst parts of the generational curse is how it minimizes anything it deems is inferior. And so it just completely eradicates so much of just so much that could really make an impact. And the gatekeepiness of it is something that's really hypocritical of the older generations. And I think that's one of the most important parts that Generation Z is really making something amplified is the gatekeepingness, because it's like they're calling it out. You guys are calling it out. I love that call out, Helena. That was like, you were one of my favorite people because you were so awesome with just calling it out how it is, saying I wasn't even paid attention to when I got a standing ovation last year. And that is some real problems that have probably made so many poor decisions. And I really hope that just creating platforms like this where we can continue to amplify voices that fight against all of that systemic oppression in all of its forms, I hope we're able to make a difference with that. And our next question is, because that was kind of a heavy question. So I would love to know what have been some of your favorite parts of your journey so far. We will start with you, Isabel.
I think before I became disabled, like when I was a little kid, I used to play in the orchestra. I was a violinist, and I just loved that feeling of when we'd all come together and play. I loved it so much more than playing individually. And I think the disability justice movement has provided me with that same feeling. Now that I have a disability, I like physically can't play the violin anymore, but whenever I'm at a protest, I feel that same feeling. Or when I'm advocating online of a group of people, when I'm at a conference of other disabled people, I do feel that like pride together and that like fight together. That is just such a special feeling. So having those community moments have like, that's like a wide thing, has just been such a great feeling in this journey that's just carried me through and giving me that empowerment, even when there's like hard moments, to just keep going. I think my happiest individual moment has been a couple months ago. I spoke at Keene University, and there was, right after I finished, like normally I think like Sane pointed out something really insightful, that we don't see youth activists that much within disability rights compared to the environmental movement, to these other movements that are very much youth led. We don't really see that at the disability rights movement as much. So I'm always tend to be like the only young person. I think this is the only time I've ever been in a room where someone is younger than me. So at this like university conference, was the International Human Rights Conference there, in the audience, this group of like teenage girls my age just came up to me. And I mean, one of them gave me like origami, someone had like drawn me and like all these things. And they just came to me to speak about disability rights and how they were seeing my videos on TikTok and how they wanted to also get involved in the movement. And that was just really, really like made me realize that I'm not just speaking to a group of 40-year-olds, I'm also speaking to my peers. I remember we also spoke about how we were applying to college that month, and we had these common experiences. And I think that was just like probably the happiest moment I've ever had. And one of those moments where I did feel that like orchestra feeling of community.
I love how you were able to adapt to losing one thing that was really important to you and replace it with something that is like even more powerful. You're able to still get those feelings, but the impacts that you're making with that, it's like, I see how you took a negative and you turned it into a positive, because it's really tragic to lose something that we loved, and to be able to kind of replace it with something that gives us a more purpose. It might be a different purpose from what we originally were intending, but that's truly where we can make the change happen. And it's like amazing to have these spaces where we are in community and in collective with one another, because I've also been in spaces where I'm the youngest person in the room and I'm the only person that really knows about
anti-ableism and all of that, and with a whole bunch of parents who have disabled children. And it's a whole different environment than the online and disability pride, the community that is pridefully disabled really is. And I do think that having the digital space exist gives us more of that empowerment to make an impact in that real life adult dominated older generation thing, because sadly, thanks to their ableism and elitism, you have to have a whole bunch of accolades, you have to have a whole bunch of projects, you have to have a whole bunch of certifications. But this online space of all of these things that we're able to do, all of these conferences we're able to speak at, all of these papers and everything, it's like that's giving the resume that will allow a seat at the table. And it's just an amazing thing that happens, that it makes me happy that it's happening at least. Zane, I would love to go to you next with what has been some of your favorite parts of this journey so far?
Yeah, I will share there's been, many celebratory moments, especially this past year. But I will share first, for people who want to be an advocate, those moments are nice and they shine a light and they, contribute to your why, but it's hard to be an advocate. And there's nothing wrong with questioning if you want to keep doing this work. There are many times where I question, do I really want to do this? And sometimes I'm like, I'm just going to do my career. But I always get back to disability. It's always so important to me. And you have that fear that goes in the back of your head when you start a new job. Do they have a disability culture? Can I ask for accommodations? And when you can, when they have a disability ERG, it's like heaven singing. It just makes me so excited that there's a group that actually knows about disability. I don't have to have that token on my shoulders. And you may not necessarily be classified as the specific token, but I still think people will go to you sometimes, or they'll think, oh, disability, I'll go to this person. No, they're not the spokesperson. They didn't sign up for that. And it's unfortunate that people have to have that on their shoulders. Anyways, so that's just what I'm thinking about. It is hard, but those moments really keep me going. And one of them was I was accepted into the first ever Mental Health Youth Action Forum. And I say first ever, there's been many mental health forums, but this one was specifically hosted by MTV, and it was at the White House. And so it was the first time the White House ever hosted a national conversation about intersectional youth mental health, which is incredibly exciting. And the event was actually displayed all over the national media. I remember people even saying that they saw me on TV in the audience, or not the audience, but on the event stage. And I thought that was just great, not just because people recognized me, but because I feel like there was this symbolic moment that I don't know what the forum did, if it changed policy for mental health, but I think that it was such a moment that people could turn on their TVs and have people actually talking about suicide and eating disorders at the White House, where you're talking with Dr. Biden was there, Selena Gomez, and we know that she's had her fair share of mental health problems, and Dr. Murthy, who's published a lot of work in mental health. So you have people who came together who are passionate about youth mental health. And it was just an exciting thing to see. And at the end of the event, President Biden did show up, and I think that was a very awe-inspiring, euphoric moment. I say euphoric because it felt like a dream. I feel like sometimes those moments feel like a dream. But yeah, President Biden, did show up. And say what you want about President Biden, but he has spoken highly of people with disabilities, and he is, very much aware of the community. And I'm glad that he's, actually vocal about those issues, and he talks about mental health as well. And so moments like those is what makes me incredibly proud and just excited to do this work. And that when I feel alone or alienated, that I remind myself of that, and also just remind myself of my worth. Ever since the forum, I have been pitching myself to media outlets, to podcasts. I've spoken on over, I think 50 or 60 at this point about wellness and mental health, and just recognizing my worth, that my voice is important. And for the longest time, I didn't think it was. But moments like those really make me feel like I'm valuable.
And I hope you don't forget to mention in all of these pitches that you are also a global award winner for the
Disability 2022 Diversability D30 Disability Impact List, because that is a really great honor too, because you are important, you are valued, and it's like what you're talking about with the with the White House event, the media impact of that, it goes so far beyond just being a newscast. Because it's like, this is why I always tried to get disability stories on air when I worked in news, because it's not just a story. You're making a visible representation that is controlled by the people who are empowering the narrative. You're not having anybody undermine or invalidate or euphemize. Like, it's the powerful lived experiences. And so it is so powerful to see like the large, like one of the most important places in the United States, acknowledging, recognizing, celebrating, bringing together these conversations, and then having all of the national media pick it up. Because I cannot tell you how hard it was trying to get people to cover in my station. They did not pick my stories. And so it's like amazing to see how it's come so far, and just to see how that's going to be the first of many. And I really hope you continue to pitch yourself. And I love that you also mentioned something really authentic, that it's exhausting doing this work. Sometimes you question your value, you question if you want to continue to do it, you get really burnt out. And so it's like really important to vocalize that, I feel like, because as leaders and creators, just whatever we are, we try to always put off that it's a great thing so other people will do it too. And then they don't realize that, oh, this is tiring. Oh, trolls are going to be commenting here. Like, they don't really realize the vulnerability, I guess, of it. So I love that you touched on that. So you're kind of giving people just a heads up of, you have permission to quit if you want to. You have permission to feel all of the things that you will inevitably feel when you put yourself out there in this way. So I want to thank you a whole lot, Zane, for doing that, because I think, again, that's one of the most powerful parts of Gen Z, is the real authenticness and the accepting of everything as it is. It's like, not everything has to be toxic positivity. Like, life has the light and the dark. And so I appreciate that you have been touching on that all throughout the event, because that's a really important thing to understand as we continue to just try to dismantle the ableist society. Helena, I would love to go to you next with this question of, what has been some of your favorite parts of your journey so far?
I think knowing that I am 13 and have this kind of agency, that my experiences and my voice matter, is my favorite part. Most of the communities I am in rarely recognize me for any of the work I do. And so when organizations like Diversability give me a global honor for the work, it means so much to me, because so many still try to keep me invisible, want to diminish my work, and withhold affirmation of what I accomplish for whatever reasons. I do make this one point all the time when it comes to having disabilities, and that is that you just can't win, because even when you do well, people don't believe you are capable and put it down. Another thing I love is that there have been wildly impossible things happen to me. Like a recent major channel contacted me and asked me to be a guest on one of their shows, and it will air for Black History Month in a few days. The show is about African American changemakers, and they wanted me. I signed an NDA, so I can't talk about it until it airs, but stay tuned to helenalourdes.com. I got to go to a real studio, meet the stars, be all made up, be dressed by wardrobe and makeup professionals, and was on a real Hollywood set with 40 or 50 professionals filming me. and it was just something that most people don't get to experience. In March, I've been asked to be the plenary keynote speaker for the National Education Association, the nation's the largest labor union with over 3 million members, and I'll be their youth voice for disability justice. I've really gotten to do more and more as my work and skills build, and that is pretty exciting.
I am so excited for you. Like, I'm going to be watching your website like a hawk, because I was going to ask, but totally get the idea. That is so awesome that you are being elevated in the way you truly deserve to be. And I know that the more and more the world sees you, they're going to want to share your voice too. And I'm so glad that we have been able to really honor you in the way that we're able to. That's like the best part of the disability impact list that we do, is being able to celebrate people who truly deserve to be amplified when the world doesn't amplify it enough. I do see that we actually have some questions from the chat. And so I do want to get to them real quick. We can at least get to one before we start to wind down. So I see McKenna Leese has asked, what initially helped you gain confidence as an advocate? And so I will start with you, Isabel.
I think the thing that made me gain confidence as an advocate is I do competitive speech and debate, just one of those high school after school activities. And I think so much of my advocacy is speech based. I mean, my TikToks are just me breaking down these issues. I think most protests I go to, I'm speaking at conferences like this are speech based. So I think having that outside really helped me. I also think having a disabled community with me, having a great support system definitely helped me. Yeah.
Oh, I know your debate teachers have to be so proud every time they just like keep up with what you're doing. It makes so much sense hearing that, why you were such a powerful orator, because you really just deliver in your words, if that makes sense. Like, it's awesome to listen to you. Zane, I would love to toss this question over to you. What gave you confidence initially as an advocate?
I think it's a hard question for me because I think confidence and imposter syndrome fluctuate. And for people who don't know what imposter syndrome is, it's this feeling that you're an imposter in a room of experts where you don't belong. And it definitely can eat at your soul. But I think it's important to distinguish though, that I do have confidence as an advocate, but in certain other spaces I don't have confidence as an advocate. Maybe it's because the aura wasn't there, or if didn't know that they were perpetuating ableism, or my other identities weren't embraced. I think sometimes in disability spaces, sometimes disability is not a monolith, but sometimes when we enter these spaces, it feels like one. And we don't see diverse faces or voices, and then I feel not as confident. So sometimes it really is based on the environment, but I have to remind myself of my why, of my specific community that I have created, the people that I have built relationships with, and remember those spaces. And remember when I get someone reaching out that they've experienced suicide and that they appreciated me talking about it, or even just jumping on a call with someone and we just bring up suicide or bring up mental health or disability, that wasn't the intention at all, but it just happened. Moments like that of connection are what really keep me going, and that's what gives me confidence.
I totally feel that. I'm one of those people that I don't even realize it, but suddenly we're in a whole little like trauma session, just sharing and like empathizing and relating. And that's truly where I feel the most belonging, is when people don't judge me for just talking about such deep topics. It's like, I can't do small talk, but I can totally try to understand why you feel a certain way about a certain something. Like, it's like I live for those types of connections. And so it's like that when I'm in those types of spaces, I totally understand feeling confident, and then not feeling so confident when you don't feel that safe to speak in such a candid way, and when you're not in places where you see a multifaceted experience. And I think that's one of the most important duties a lot of event organizers have, is making sure that there is a diverse set of people sharing their experiences, because we're not a monolith and we'll never know how diverse disability actually is until we start making sure we have different voices. We are a little close to time. We have 10 minutes left, so I want to make sure we give everyone enough time for final thoughts and to brag about yourselves. So Helena, I would love to know, how can we celebrate you and how can we support you? If you have any upcoming projects coming, well, you have an awesome thing coming in a few days. Can't wait for that one.
Well, thank you. And you are celebrating me by honoring me as one of your D30 list honorees and by having me here to speak today. You can share my website with your network, tell them that you heard me speak and that there are important things to say and that I am just fine speaking truth to power. You can also share some of my scholarship. And do keep me in mind for other projects, whether it is speaking or writing. The main thing for me as a disability justice activist is to tell my own story as a Black girl with multiple learning disabilities who just simply refuses for anyone else to define my identities for me. I define myself. And in doing so, I am only proud of my disabilities, and I want other children my age to lift any veil of shame they might have about learning differently and replace it with an armor of self-worth. I want to help build a movement of us, bold and bright and confident. Imagine, if you will, a school full of us refusing to be diminished, refusing deficit ideologies, and fiercely but kindly, but fiercely but kindly, but fiercely advocating for our assets to be recognized. That is what I want to be a part of. Thank you so much for welcoming me into your loving community.
Thank you so much for being a part of it. I'm so excited to continue to just make sure your voice gets amplified. You're in the DLC now, and if anybody wants to join the DLC to get connected and to have more opportunities and to network, just to have conversations of like this one, please feel free to reach out and we can make that happen. Isabel, I would love to celebrate you next and just find out if there's any project you're working on, we can support you, and how we can just celebrate you in general.
Thank you. So I have a series of webinars coming out with the ACLU soon that are going to be breaking down different disability rights issues, starting from the beginning. My first one is going to be on breaking down the disability history pre-ADA. So basically what I talk about in my TikToks, but in long form, because 60 seconds is not really enough to cover policy and history that's so rich. So I'm definitely going to be speaking about that on my social media soon. So you can get links to all of that and how to sign up. And for my social media, it's Powerfully Isa on everything: TikTok, Instagram, and Twitter. And that's the best way to support me and find out what I have coming up.
Awesome, thank you so much. And next, Zane, I would love to know how we can celebrate you and where we can support you, and any cool projects you have coming up that we can help support you on.
Yeah, of course. As always, I am always sharing content on the digital magazine. People from different spans of life, featuring someone who started an anti-Asian or targeting and trying to prevent anti-Asian photography series. So stuff like that, very different stories, but things we need to hear. You can celebrate me by following me on social media, and please reaching out about anything you want to talk about. I am more than happy to set a coffee chat to mentor. I just got my first entry-level job at National Geographic, so I definitely can support you if you have any questions about that, about public relations. I wanted to say this before. We need more people with disabilities in PR, because it's not just having that story. How do we leverage the media networks to get your story there? There's a lot of loopholes you have to go through, and a lot of people you have to go through sometimes. But I love that the media is, a little more open to different stories nowadays. Stuff I'm working on, I'm on board for several organizations for Love is Respect. I just got on the Next Gen board for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, which is really exciting. And yeah, a lot of the work I do is, just supporting organizations, serving as an advisor. But I'm really excited to be part of this community. when I was chosen for G30, I was really surprised. I was really proud, but I was really surprised. I really didn't think I would get it. So I still have those thoughts that know where I'm not confident. But thank you for accepting me into this loving community. And like I said from the very beginning, the reason why I stayed with the disability community is because of how they made me feel. And so I think that how we treat caretakers and allies and people without disabilities is really important. So we want that diverse bunch to make sure that, you know, historically people with disabilities have not been in positions of power. So we really have to work with allies and people who, you know, may not have disabilities, because they uphold those positions of power, and hopefully they become aware, and then people with disabilities can have those positions of power and share those powers. And so that's the last thing I will say is, you know, as we move forward, I know it's hard, and advocacy is hard, especially when you experience resistance. But I think that if you come from that place of love and understanding, and you hope that they find their way into understanding inclusivity and diversity, I think it's a lot better for your heart as an advocate, because it's a lot. So that's one thing I'll say is celebrate. Thank you for celebrating me, but also celebrate yourself and the work you're doing.
Thank you so much, Zane. And it's truly an honor to have all of you guys in our community, our collective, to be able to just have conversations like these and learn from each other and grow alongside of each other. It's been such a phenomenal 90 minutes, and I can't believe we're like wrapping up now, because we can honestly just keep going and going. If you are interested, again, as I said, we have conversations like these in the DLC. And also we do have our 2023 D30 Disability Impact List nomination coming up in a few months, I believe. So we're going to be doing it for our 4th year this year. And I will not be surprised if I see some familiar names, if you know what I mean, because you guys are just phenomenal. And it's been an honor getting to sit here and get to know you guys. So thank you so much. I would like to thank our interpreters. Interpreter now, we have Andrea and Isabella. Thank you so much for making sure that we've been able to be fully accessible with our communications. And I would like to, I guess, just end the night, because we are close to time, and it's better to end shorter than go over, especially on a school night. So thank you so much again for taking the time to talk with us, and I look forward to getting to grow again with you guys. So thank you everyone for joining us. Bye-bye.
Thank you. Bye.
Thank you so much.